Hello Danila, this is my feedback to your summary from last week. So let's begin. In this TED video talk, it was a lecture, not so much a TED talk, and I would say just include the name of the lecture, right? The title, of the lecture. By the way, I think the best thing to do would be to include a Google Doc instead of a Word doc. So next time, can you please just use the Google Doc and I can use the comment function, because it's a bit complicated with a Word doc. The comments don't always reach you. I don't know. In some cases they don't. Okay, let's get back to this. Professor Daniele, okay, you've included the name of the speaker. That's a good idea. Describes the difference between invention and innovation. Sure, that's what the lecture was about. It's very descriptive. Now, if we wanted to make an argument out of it, remember the rubric says that the main idea should be expressed as an argument. What can we say? So we could use argues that, right? Or claims that, and then how would you finish the sentence? Maybe you want to say argues that there is an important distinction, or that it is very important for us to know the distinction between invention and innovation, something like that. So that will phrase that, you'll phrase that a little bit more argumentatively. Okay? And that will complete this first sentence. He defines invention as a new idea. Invention is just general, so there's no need for an article. The invention is one specific invention. He's talking about invention in general, so no need for an article. He defines invention as a new idea, a new scientific or technological development that has not yet been implemented. Sure. If you want to use, that's a very good sentence. If you want to use a little bit more of your own phrasing, you can say that has not yet been that has not been made available on the market or something like that. That has not become a commercial product. That has not become a commercialized product. I think that would be also another way of putting it. But this is very clear what we've done here. I'm just not sure how much of this is your own phrasing and how much is actually directly borrowed from the lecture. But remember, when we write a summary, we always do our best to try and avoid repeating the phrasing of the author. Moreover, he describes innovation as the transformation of an invention into a new product or process, and its commercial and social exploitation. Sure. Again, very clear, a very nice way of putting it. Again, I'm not very sure how much of this is your own phrasing. I think he did mention some of these key terms. Transformation, he mentioned transform, and some of the other ones. So if you wanted to make it to use more of your own phrasing, you could say, until something about a product reaching the market, something like that, becoming widely available, right? He mentions that innovation is the process of turning knowledge into economic benefits. Okay, fine. I think here you've used your own wording, I think. Okay, the process of turning knowledge into a product which brings economic benefits. That would be a more precise way of putting it, but you've done a good job. So far, quite focused. So you're talking about the supporting ideas one after the other. You're using reporting verbs. You're referring to the name of the speaker. A bit of cohesion here, moreover. Okay. Here maybe you could use another cohesive device. Right? Like you've done here. He also uses, he also mentions. Now look at how he describes, he mentions, he uses, he mentions. He also points, he also points. So all of these start in a very kind of similar, almost identical way, these sentences. If you want to introduce more variety, you could say something like, Another point discussed by Archibuggi is that blah blah blah, right? Or having discussed the characteristics or the differences between innovation and invention, Archibuggi goes on to explain blah blah blah. See? So I could do a little bit more extended phrasing just for the sake of variety. But one thing I like about this summary is it's very clear, very focused. He mentions is the process of turning knowledge into a product which has economic benefits. Okay, something like that. He also uses pictures to explain the theoretical concepts he explained. To explain the theoretical concepts he explained, you want to tidy that up a little bit more, right? To illustrate his definition, or to test, or to illustrate the difficulty in distinguishing between the two terms, Archibuggi uses pictures. Or you can start with here. He also uses pictures in order to illustrate the difficulty in having clear-cut definitions, because that's kind of the point, right? The point, the supporting idea there was it's not so easy to distinguish. So you kind of want to rephrase this a little bit to avoid the repetition. He also mentions that the simplest way to distinguish between innovation and invention. Okay. And then what happened? He also mentions that the simplest way to distinguish between innovation and invention and then is what? Comma, if a product. That just doesn't work grammatically. In terms of sentence structure, it's not grammatical, this one. In order, the simplest way to distinguish between, I like the phrase this is a very nice phrase, distinguish between, comma, if a product can exist, okay, I think what you're trying to say is whether a product. So here, instead of comma, if, right here, you could say, there's no comma, you can just say, is whether a product, and then move on. Whether a product can exist on the market for more than a year and can be bought at any time. And then this comma is innovation, just kind of like a fragment kind of hanging at the end of the sentence, so you don't need that, right? Or, I know what you're saying, but it just grammatically doesn't work. You're saying the simplest way to distinguish between innovation and invention is that if, but again, it doesn't really work. I know what you're doing. If a product, it is an innovation. But you've ended up with a kind of somewhat clumsy grammatical construction which just doesn't work. I would just say, if you want to keep the if clause, which confuses the structure, but if you really insist on keeping the if then type of structure, then you will probably need to rephrase the whole thing. You will say something like, one of the simplest ways, or the simplest way, just say the simplest way. He also as Archibuggi explains, comma, the simplest way to distinguish between innovation and invention is to ask whether a product can exist on the market for more than a year and can be bought at any time. That's it. When you repeat innovation here, it really makes it kind of clumsy. That this kind of hangs like a fragment. I'm trying very hard to make something grammatical out of this, and it's really difficult. As Archibuggi explains, okay, this is what you can say. As Archibuggi explains, if a product can exist on the market for more than a year and can be bought at any time, comma, it is an invention, semicolon. This is the simplest way to distinguish between the two concepts. Something like that, right? It's very hard to combine everything and all into one and make it grammatical. Okay, so I would just drop the if because it really complicates things. I think it's much better to simplify. If is good without if it's not used with this. See, you're starting with one phrase, then you're using an if in the middle of a sentence, and it becomes very difficult. You can just say, as Archiboogie explains, if a product can exist on the market, it is an innovation. That's one variation. A second variation, start the way you've said, but don't do the if. As he explains, he mentions that the simplest way to distinguish between innovation and invention is to ask whether a product can exist on the market for more than a year and can be bought at any time, full stop. Okay, something like that. But the two of them together, they're just very difficult to combine an if clause, which is a complex type of structure, into the middle of a sentence in this way. It's just very difficult. But once again, this is a clear idea. So again, your writing is very clear and focused. He also points out that everything we do happens within the organization. So organization, yeah, I'm not sure what this is supporting actually. It's not really a very important supporting idea, this one. Maybe he mentions it, but I don't think it adds, it doesn't really add much to the summary. He also pointed out, remember we use the present simple, points out, you've done it everywhere else, defines, mentions, good work. He also points out that management ideas and theoretical ideas within the organization play a very important role in improving practical work. Now this is very important. You can keep that. You don't need the previous idea. So this is actually quite a good supporting idea. Finally, he concludes that organizational management and theoretical ideas play a very important role. We already said that, right? Play a very important role. This is the same thing, just repeat it. In the era of global competition. Yeah, okay, that's fine. I would say I would accept this. Not a bad concluding sentence. But I would say just end the way he ended, which was very nice when he mentioned that story of the pen. Now, by the way, you've done a very good job not to include examples. As you know, in these summaries, we do not include examples, so good work. But what is the idea that he illustrates by giving that story of the pen? He was talking about the pen started out as a very insignificant invention, but once it became an innovation, it had this enormous social impact. And it's that development is unpredictable. From an insignificant invention to a very important product on the market with an enormous social impact, that transition is not always predictable. That was kind of his last concluding thought. So you can end with something like that. Okay? Because plays a very important role, it's just a bit too general. I mean, we know that it plays an important role. That's kind of like background knowledge, right? So you can end with that if you want to. But overall, again, very well structured summary. A little bit of repetition in the phrasing here. He uses key points. But it's clear, it's focused, well organized. So good work and good writing as well. Okay, I hope this is helpful to you, Dinala. And I'll see you soon.